Hello, my name is Dr. Michael DeAndrea. I'm a faculty member at Springfield College and the director of school counseling here at Springfield College. I'm delighted to be here with my friend, and I'll let him introduce himself.
My name is Richard Mills. I'm an alumni of Springfield College, and I'm a lifelong resident of Springfield, Massachusetts.
So great to be here. And the reason that we're here is that Richard did something that we try to encourage all of our students to do as they move into professional careers in schools and agencies and rehab centers, as well as the administrators that we work with and other allied professionals, and that was community outreach.
Yes.
And how I met Richard was that he met with one of our faculty members in rehab counseling saying, you know, I have epilepsy and I've had experiences with epilepsy in people, and I'm concerned that they're not getting the respect and the services they need to realize their potential as human beings.
Yes.
And our faculty member put out an announcement, hey, Richard Mills has offered his services and talked about having a presentation in one of the classes.
Yes.
And I said, this is too important to have it just a one-shot deal. So we've met a couple of times together.
Yes, we have.
And to talk about developing a video. And the main purpose of this video is to increase the awareness of people who will view the video, to become more understanding of some of the dynamics that underlie this important disease, and what we can do as community members and as professionals to try to address some of the shortcomings that you know firsthand.
Yes. Well, I suffered from epilepsy since my youth, and definitely I could see the differences when you're going through middle school, high school, and then when you graduate. When you graduate, it's a whole different ball game that you definitely should be ready for, a lot of changes.
What are some of the changes that go when you graduate?
Well, if you think about it, one of the rites of passage of a young person is getting a car. So as you're getting older and people seeing you walk, then that's the start of the stigma. There's something different about you. You don't walk, or there's look at the way you think, and so the stigma happens, and you don't realize it at first. And it begins to dawn on you as time goes by. It's definitely, I feel that the children, that's what I'm mostly concerned about, that, if epilepsy, by the way, it can be fatal. It could be fatal. And having that on your mind, you always try to wonder, what can I do to help improve the environment around me? And I thought about that, and why not raise the awareness about the epilepsy, that it could be easier for the future generation. So when you're young and you have this, you feel very embarrassed because you don't understand it. And there's not many people you can go to really talk about it.
Because they don't understand it.
They don't understand it.
Wow.
It's one thing knowing about it or reading about it. It's another thing experiencing it. It's even very hard for the families of the loved ones of the person afflicted.
And we might have students in our elementary school or high schools here, or family members coming to a school counselor to say, one of the stresses I have is that my child has epilepsy. I don't know what to do in these situations.
Yes.
So I wanted to ask you, so our audience gets settled here, what is epilepsy?
Well, epilepsy is, there's epilepsy and then there's seizure disorders.
Okay.
So seizure disorders, they first have to get diagnosed by a specialist, more likely a neurologist. And after going through EEGs or CAT scans, they come to the determination that you have epilepsy. So epilepsy is a reoccurring seizures, and more than likely they don't know what the cause of these seizures are. So right away, they put you on anticonvulsant medicines, and now you're dealing with the effects of the seizures and the anticonvulsant medicines.
Is there any outstanding reactions to the anticonvulsant medications that stand out for you, either personally or your observations from other people with epilepsy?
So this is what I'm saying with the younger population. One of them is fatigue. It can make you very tired. So from a teacher's point of view, this is a lazy child.
Yeah.
Or this child doesn't pay attention.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes.
Okay.
There's other things like short-term memory. The medicines are so strong that short-term memory. So you're not trying hard enough.
Yeah.
So all these accusations because of a lack of understanding, which creates a stigma that is not being addressed because of lack of awareness.
So fatigue and short-term learning are adversely impacted often from these anticonvulsant medications.
Yes.
And that's an awareness that I hope people who view the video will take away with them, and then on their own, we'll make our own suggestions, but the people viewing this are going to have some of their own ideas, which is the purpose of coming together today.
Yes.
Is to increase awareness.
Yes.
You've mentioned some things that are important. One, you talked about from a medical perspective what epilepsy is, the medications, anticonvulsants, the impact that they have, and clearly lead to inaccurate interpretations of laziness or just not trying hard enough for that.
Or even in some cultures that you're cursed.
Interesting. Good point, because we do a lot of training in multiculturalism here, and part of what we look at are religious, spiritual beliefs of people in different cultural groups.
Yes, yes.
So I'm so glad you made that point, that the whole idea, and counselors out there who are dealing with a family member who has a child who has epilepsy, maybe bring up the issue of the curse.
Yes, well, I began my campaign around April 2019.
Okay.
So this campaign was professional, but also personal.
Sure.
This was the year that I decided to come out and tell my story. I really didn't want to be the poster man for epilepsy, because I didn't want to be defined as he's the guy with epilepsy. Nor did I want people thinking that I'm coming up with excuses for any shortcomings. It's not like that. But what happened was, after so many years, I finally found a way to live independently away from my family home. So that was a major life change. And if you're in the medical field, you understand what an impact that is to go through a major life change. That caused a lot of stress, and that caused a lot of seizures. So what I did was try to look for a new support system. And I started going to different groups and just listen. For some reason, I fit in very well with the grief group. The grief support group, they lost somebody, but I understood what they were talking about. And it was very interesting. I said, well, I must be grieving. What is it that I'm grieving about?
What'd you come up with when you had that question?
I'm grieving, I guess, because as a grown adult, at the age I'm in, maybe I thought that I would have certain things, but I feel like I'm 10 or 20 years behind, still catching up with my colleagues. Sometimes that's what it feels like. And I'm grieving that there's a lot of potential that I can do, but I haven't found that way to make it smoother for me.
Now, with the grief groups, which, by the way, in our program, we talk about grief groups and a broad range of reasons why people are grieving. Can you think and articulate one or two of the best things you took away from listening, as you said, as a participant in these grief groups? How was that helpful? So our audience knows why grief groups might be a possibility.
Well, as we brought up about the different cultures, a lot of the groups are similar because you hear about the grief. There was one time that I was given a speech about epilepsy, and this was a different group by head trauma. And after explaining to them about what it is and how people react, a woman came up to me afterward and thanked me. I said, okay. She said, my mother had epilepsy. In the community that we lived in, they told her to give her up because she was cursed for having a baby.
Wow.
And she said she never forgave her mother for that and didn't understand until I explained the different mindsets here. And that touched me. That touched me that it made me realize that there is something to this, more of a higher purpose, because there's so much misunderstanding around this topic, epilepsy.
So you said something earlier about stigmatization. Now you're giving a very important and heartbreaking example of stigmatization, where the neighbors and peers in the neighborhood were encouraging this woman's mother to give her up.
Yes.
Because of the disease, because she was cursed.
Yes.
So I'm assuming that administrators and allied professionals and counselors viewing this might want to consider stigmatization and how it's manifested with people with epilepsy. And you're given a really good example
Yes.
of the idea of the curse.
In modern times, I mean, epilepsy is still seen as a joke. Mm-hmm. You'll see comedians making skits about it, and you know, to someone, the unknowing eye or uninformed people, it seems funny. But when you live through it, or you have a family member with it, it's a very painful. It's of course, a mother or father don't want to see their child going through this, and they feel so helpless that they can't help the child. The child who has the epilepsy feels so guilty that they're putting their family through this. There's a lot of guilt in this. You're trying to figure out ways of how to get out of this, and it's a very tough life to go through.
You used an earlier point by saying 1 out of 26 people in the United States have epilepsy. That's a pretty large number of people.
1 out of 26 people will be diagnosed with epilepsy, and 1 out of 10 people worldwide have epilepsy.
Wow, that's a lot of people.
Yeah, that's a lot of people. So about 6 million people in the United States have epilepsy, and every year there's about 150,000 new cases.
And you said something in our meetings before that, and I'll ask again, just for my own clarity, is there any particular group, socioeconomic class, any racial or ethnic group, any gender, male or female, that tends to be disproportionately represented with epilepsy?
The special thing for me about epilepsy is that it doesn't discriminate. When you go to a person with epilepsy, they will understand things that I don't know how to put it at the moment, but they'll understand things that maybe the general public wouldn't understand. The same type of discrimination a similar group would go through, definitely people with epilepsy will go through. And I feel, again, that's where this community needs the most help with how to deal with this due to the stigma, how to deal with the discrimination.
So if we can, as we say, is to keep it real. For the folks that are taking an interest in the ideas that we're talking about right now, we can't do all things for all people in our schools and our agencies. Administrators can't address all of the injustices, and we consider the lack of respectful and effective treatment with persons with epilepsy as being an injustice. That's how we would frame going on here. So when I hear you talking, I keep hearing stigmatization is due to misunderstanding of what the disease is all about and how it's manifested. I'm wondering now, for school counselors, for mental health counselors, for administrators who set policies and get resources to address the needs of people working in schools and community agencies, what are some of the tips we can do to deal with this stigmatization? One suggestion I have, and I need feedback from you on this, is that can we have a series of 30-minute brief presentations with follow-up on Teacher Professional Development Day that specifically deal with epilepsy, so that people can expand some of the awareness they're gaining from this video by having 30-minute lecture followed by 20-minute question and answer for teachers, and perhaps 3 times a year doing that specifically with epilepsy, so that people can go from this video learning to a higher level. What would you think about that?
Very interesting. It reminds me of the work that coalitions, including Epilepsy Foundation of Western Mass. The director there, her name is Susan Lin. I thank her very much for the work that she's doing throughout the communities, and as well as her staff. They have gone and made a bill and presented to the State House, what they're planning on is making the schools seizure safe. So I believe that's going to be part of the curriculum, educating the teachers about how to recognize a seizure and seizure first aid. So that what you just said, that's in the process of happening, thanks to Epilepsy Foundation of Worcester, Mass.
Some of the students that we work with in our graduate program are encouraged to consider how they can become more community and politically active. So this bill that's being presented by Epilepsy Foundation is an example. I love the term that you use, Epilepsy Safe Schools. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay. That's something that we can talk about in our program, but also the people that are using this video to increase their awareness. Might not be a bad idea to talk with other colleagues in the counseling department in the schools, and then to have someone approach the administrator, the principal of the school, by saying, 1 out of 26 people are diagnosed or will have epilepsy. That means somewhere in the school, those invisible people will become visible with convulsive seizures going on here.
Yes. You see, there's a lot of facts about seizures that even I beginning to learn. One of the most impressive is that there's 40 different types of seizures.
Wow.
So each one has its unique characteristics to it. And the reason why the seizures are hard to treat is because one medicine doesn't work the same for the next medicine. So what I feel is that if people were coming together or they were to create a show or whatever to present, there's a whole lot of topics we can cover. One of them is for the counselor or the person themselves is to understand other side effects of the seizure, such as anxiety and depression. A lot of people afflicted by this don't know how to deal with their
anxiety and
depression. It's a very serious for this community versus the general population. I see now that it's becoming more of a topic to talk about, but it's especially important for the epilepsy community.
I'm so glad you're saying that.
Yes, because they go through it all their life that is normalized.
Yes.
So they don't see that it's not normal.
The anxiety and the depression.
And for them, it's more because now they may have to turn to medicines to help them manage this.
Which have their own side effects.
Right. So the medicines, like you said, it can get tricky because they have their own side effects. And what do you do? The person with epilepsy needs to understand that they need to visit their doctors, all their doctors, more on a regular basis, and to keep a journal about what's going on, how they're feeling. It's not only taking down how many seizures you had, but what were your moods today? If for whatever reason you woke up very angry or anxious, that should be talked about with your doctor and a counselor to help you manage these things.
That's such an important thing you just said, and it's a barrier for a lot of people, because earlier in our discussion you talked about the stigmatization and the embarrassment that families will have. And so our role as counselors and other allied professionals is to be able to provide an environment where people reduce their feelings of embarrassment as we build a positive relationship with them. And these points that you're bringing up are important. When was the last time you took your child to a doctor about this? Well, I don't remember when it was. Do you have a doctor? What's the doctor's name? Because advocacy takes two forms that we use with our students to implement the field. One is to encourage people who are facing challenges to advocate for themselves.
Yes.
To go to the doctor on their own. At the same time, the embarrassment level, the fear, the stigmatization immobilizes family members from being able to advocate for themselves. So we then encourage advocating with the client. That might mean making visits to the doctor with the family member in order to provide the support.
Yes. That helps a lot. That helps a lot because the person living with epilepsy needs as much support as they can get. Everyone's different, but I see the common line is that the communication part. and you know, and the lack of information. You know, so definitely things like that will help the person living with epilepsy as well as their family.
You're really helping me become more aware of at least three things. Well, more than that, the number of people with epilepsy, you made me aware of that. You're making me aware of what it is, and talking about the side effects of medication and the 40 different types of seizures. I wasn't aware of that. Then we're talking right now about what individual counselors can do with advocacy. Number one, try to support people who have the inner strength to advocate for themselves, and at the same time, being able to go to a doctor to help provide support with family members and individuals in the family that have epilepsy. The fourth thing I hear us agreeing to is that counselors can do a better job of reaching out to the administrators in schools and community agencies to say, you know, I've been studying about epilepsy and just saw a video on it. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about things that we can do, because the number of people with this so-called invisible disease, we're going to encounter them. And I'd like to talk, so that's a form of advocacy at a systems level. Then the final thing that you're making me aware of is that bill that's coming before the legislature with the Epilepsy Foundation advocates that have to do with creating safe epilepsy schools. I bet the vast majority of counselors working in schools, I wasn't aware of it, and now I am, and I bet many people here are aware of it. So we're covering a number of things to increase my awareness, and I'm confident that people that are viewing what we're saying here, their awareness too. Other points that you think are important to cover?
I mean, well, for the counselors, is just that the person going through this kind of life, they're trying to figure out things. What do I do from here? How do I get a job? Because, you know, you don't have a driver's license and you live in a small city, a lot of jobs are not going to take you just for the fact that you don't have that driver's license. So where do I go and get support? There's a lot of support out there, such as here in Springfield, there's Mass Rehab. They've been helpful. And there's a lot of other programs, but there's no clear pathway to help lead the person living with epilepsy to these things. So I feel as time goes on and the community comes together with the counselors and begin to look at these things, it'll be good for the community of epilepsy, but also be good for Springfield as a whole, because these are things that affect all of us, but it's more, it hurts more of the people, the community of people living with epilepsy.
Now, when people who are part of a group that are subjected to injustices, whether it's racism or anti-gay efforts or now epilepsy, you know, one of the things that concerns me is comments made by colleagues in my own profession and other allied professions is that, you know, we really shouldn't expect to have one person with epilepsy to talk about it, to speak for all persons with epilepsy. They really can't be a spokesperson for all folks. I disagree with that to some degree. I think you're a good spokesperson for epilepsy. Yes, I bet if we had 10 other people here, they're likely to have a little bit of a different perspective and expression of needs and strengths that are going on. But I bet they would have some commonalities with you.
They would. When I've gone out and tried to find people and just listen, you know, it's amazing how many similarities we have. Regardless of my culture and their culture, epilepsy doesn't discriminate. So you'll be so amazed how different we are, but we have a similar past. It's just as this man here, he wrote this book. He's a journalist, a very well-known journalist. He has epilepsy. This was given to me by this Epilepsy Foundation, and I began reading it. We're totally different, two different towns, but I can relate to the things that he says in this book. How he was misdiagnosed by doctors, how people who attended him when he had seizures, They didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
They had the wrong information. I mean, there's so much. I'm still reading this book, but I'm loving it so far and really soaking it in because it's definitely something that should be looked at and thought about, and action needs to be taken.
Can we take just a couple minutes and looking at the whole idea of the seizures that accompany epilepsy, right? Because it scares people when they're seeing a seizure. Now, I would think we ethically cannot provide services beyond our training, our competence. But at the same time, I'm wondering, and I know that, number one, we ought to have medical personnel call 911 when there's a seizure. I know that. And then we have trained people coming who can deal with it in more effective, ways. But what can we do in our schools, in our agencies, at a mall, at a supermarket, if someone does have a seizure in front of us without going beyond the bounds of our professional training?
So those personally is what I call the extreme seizures, what they call Tonic-Clonic. So if you see someone having a Tonic-Clonic seizure, you just unloose so that they can breathe a little.
Good.
You place them down to their side and you wait. If the seizure happens for more than 15 minutes, call 911. You don't hold them or compress them or nothing like that. You just put them to their side and let it, there's nothing you could do. And most important, because we found this a myth, you don't put nothing in their mouth.
Oh, that would be a myth I continue to adhere to.
Yes.
Why not? I'm thinking the point was to give an airway, free airway, right? Don't do that.
Right, don't do that.
Interesting.
Don't do that.
Wow.
I mean, I met people who still do that with their mothers, and they said, no, you don't. Originally, people thought that the person would swallow their tongue.
Yes.
And that's not true.
Interesting.
That's not true.
Well, I have become more and more aware because of you and the interview we're doing today.
Yes.
And I'm delighted that you are the spokesperson advocate you are for epilepsy.
Thank you. I'd just like to share that it wasn't easy getting to this point. There was a time where, as in my 20s, as I was just waiting to figure out what am I going to do, how am I going to make a living for myself. I couldn't depend on my parents, even though they wanted me near. There was a point where I was out of it, had amnesia for 3 years, and it took me that long just to at least speak again. I lost the ability to speak and think for 3 years. And after that, when I recovered, I went out. And this was after I came from a vacation when I graduated here from Springfield College. The fact that I came to Springfield College, part of that helped save me, because that gave me hope that, wait a minute, I have a college education and I had a wonderful experience here. I graduated from, by the way, the Human Services Department.
Sure.
So what can I do? So first I had to help myself. So
as you were talking about that, I was thinking, and I was going to ask you, so are you saying that being in college at Springfield College, it could be other colleges as well, was therapeutic for you? And I can see where you're saying now, yes, it was, because it gave me hope. It gave me direction.
It gave me, first of all, where I studied with like-minded people, and my professors were very supportive, and I did keep it somewhat of a secret, but I let my professors know, and I felt comfortable, I felt safe. So it was after moving out that environment that I fell somewhat into a depression, because where's my support system now? The support system is very important for the people with epilepsy. It's not about being independent, but being interdependent. So being dependent on ourselves and dependent on a support system, and being able to get out and do what we have to do. So, that's part of my story where I just never gave up. And there's been so many embarrassing moments that I don't have time to think about the embarrassing moments no more. I figure if I fall down, I have to get back up and continue what I have to do. I always remember the positive effects that I had on many people, children, elders, and other disabled people. They're the ones that give me hope to do what I have to do. So it's almost like I feel like a obligation not to fail, no matter how many times I fall.
You used the word interdependent, and you have done a lot in this short interview in terms of increasing my awareness, and I'm confident the awareness of other people. I think you give us hope to look into an area that most of us have not been trained to deal with.
Yes. I mean, you'll be surprised, a lot of people in history who had seizures, such as Alexander the Greek, Julius Caesar, Harriet Tubman, Theodore Roosevelt, one of our presidents, Van Gogh, the person who wrote Alice in Wonderland.
Oh, wow.
There are so many people, and it's kind of hidden.
Yes.
But when you go and do the research, these are people who lived with seizure disorders, and they were still able to do great things.
Great things. You're doing great things.
Thank you.
And we appreciate you taking the time to share your knowledge, to increase our awareness, and I look forward to building on this awareness in our classes here at Springfield College. We are going to have this video available on YouTube.
Yes.
People should feel good about freely using this in their classes with other colleagues as well.
Yes.
Because we're really trying to support you and other people who need us to become more aware. Thanks so much for today's work.
Also, if anyone wants to contact me, I also have a Facebook called Springfield Epilepsy Coalition, and also Epilepsy Foundation of Western New England is a great source for people out there, for us to come together and work together. There's also a walk for epilepsy.
Okay.
So that's happening this April, and I invite, please come down and support us.
Well, just so everyone knows, at the end of the video, there'll be a space where we have listed the resources you just talked about, so people can put on pause and they can notate some of the organizations that they might want to access.
Excellent.
But thanks again. This was really, really good.
Beautiful.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah.